That was close, but Washington escaped again. We're live on Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yep. Everything is going awry here today, just like what just happened at Washington. Welcome to Locked On Huskies. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies and Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this not your first watch, your first listen of the day if you're with us live here on YouTube. But today's episode, either way, is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lars Hanson, just instant reactions. What do you got for me?
In a way, it was basically how we thought it would go. Don't look at the point spread because it was never going to be that close. And not to say that when we didn't, to be clear, I was very adamant that it was going to be Stanford plus 26.5, right? The line actually went up to 27.5 before kickoff. But it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, the way Washington's offense had been playing, even if you want to say the Arizona State game was like an outlier, they didn't look that great against Arizona either before the Oregon game. Then you have the big, emotional win against Oregon. And then you come back with the quote unquote letdown trap game against Arizona State, all of which you get wins in just like tonight. Whereas like all that matters is that you win the game. That said, you would like to win it in somewhat of a convincing fashion. They never trailed, I believe, right? They didn't trail Stanford.
No, they didn't trail in this game.
But man, the fact that we're saying, did they at one point? It almost kind of felt like at times they were, but there was always just enough of a gap, right? Kind of like a 10-point gap, a two possession gap, to where Washington shouldn't lose this game, but they're going to get tested more than they probably should. And they responded at times, but again, the consistency is where they're coming into play with it's on both sides of the ball.
No, absolutely. And, I one thing that I was just thinking about it as we were prepping for the show here just a minute ago. And one thing that this kind of feels like that same stretch last year, right? Where they played at UCLA, then they played at Arizona State, lost both those games, ended up being the only two losses of the season. But it just kind of felt like in a similar fashion where just things were going wrong, but not nearly on the level that they have been over the last 2 weeks, where it's the penalties. This is now 6 turnovers in the last 2 games. And the fact that they've won both of those games is truly shocking to me, but it's not even just that, right? It's the other things that are going wrong, the drops, the penalties, just all the little things where it's just like, this seems like day one stuff for Kalen DeBoer's coaching staff. And the fact that these things are going wrong, it's just confusing in a sense. And shout out to our buddy Mike Burrell at the Seattle Times, where he had a great piece last week after the Arizona State game, where he talked about like, oh, this happened. This isn't why Washington lost. This isn't why Washington lost. This isn't why Washington lost. In fact, they won. And it kind of felt that same way tonight, right? But the one thing I want to get out right off the top, and we can just kind of keep going from here, but it's something I remember talking about with our buddy Spencer McLaughlin before the season started, where we talked about the brutal November stretch that's coming up. And I know you and I are going to talk a lot about that today and probably just over the coming weeks as well with just the schedule. But it kind of feels like going to Arizona State in a way. We're playing at Stanford. There are always just like certain demons that seem to come up, and they rear their ugly head for one last time tonight. And I feel like it's just, if we look back and then the coaching staff figures things out and they get things right over the next couple of weeks, we look back and say, yeah, they won the game because they were able to figure out the miscues and get through these 2 really, really tough games where, they were favored by a lot, but they still found a way to win.
Right, exactly. And I think to be fair, like we did see some certain types of improvements. I think the tackling was better just overall. It wasn't great, right? It wasn't perfect, but it was certainly better than what it has been.
I have some thoughts on the pass rush tackling.
Well, I was going to say, but what it's kind of like the offense, right? When we're harping about things and they still put up 40 plus points and multiple touchdowns. It's different when it's like Arizona State, when it's like they don't put up anything on offense, the defense really has to hold on for dear life and kind of get the benefit of the doubt on a few penalty calls that didn't go Arizona State's way. but Washington can make the same case, right? Certainly penalties
sure.
also on both sides tonight. There was some, I mean, the
horrendous calls.
I mean, to their credit, right? They picked the right ones up early, right? They reviewed the targeting that wasn't on Carson Bruder. They called all those correctly, but as the game went on, the refs got sloppier, the play got sloppier. It was all just kind of one of those like, hey, we are on one of these smarter campuses in the country. Can somebody go to the actual library and check out officiating and just like the
officiating
rules
for dummies?
Right, exactly. It's like, okay, but then it's also almost like, can somebody also check out football for dummies at points too? Because like, man, the first touchdown by Ashton Daniels, where he the gap up the middle was just, there was nobody home. Washington had,
and there were 12 guys on the field too.
12 guys on the field and nobody up the middle. Like that just is inexcusable. So it's like, again, and they had multiple times where I should have been correct on my four sack prediction or 4.5 sack prediction, even because they missed at least 3 in the backfield, especially in the second half alone. I mean, never mind the first half. So yes, they got home, but again, it's like, okay, in order to be a truly elite team, to be one of the top 4 teams in college football, because again, Washington loses to Michigan tonight. Washington loses to Ohio State tonight. Washington loses to Georgia tonight. Washington loses Oregon tonight, right? Even Florida State, which I haven't always thought is it's almost like Washington, Florida State are kind of battling, but even Florida State would be Washington on a neutral field tonight. It's just, yes, this team has the ability to kind of, just by all means necessary, find a way to win, right? Kalen DeBoer, I'm sure, will say that, hey, we just found a way to win again tonight. But it's like, again, yes. However, if not for that drop 4th down conversion that Stanford would have had, which, by the way, not only would have been a conversion, but that looked like almost could have been a touchdown at the same point. So it's a matter of, yes, you're taking your breaks when they come, and the old cliche that, hey, well, this is kind of like a team of destiny, right? Like all the breaks are just going their way, and then next season all the breaks are going to go the other way, right? That's kind of how football works, and there is some truth to that, but you can't lean on that, right? It's almost like don't put the hands in the hands of the officials, right? Don't look for a call, just still try and go get the ball, fight through the contact, that sort of thing, and Washington's doing still just enough, but it's by a razor thin.
It's getting down to crunch time. Yeah, it's because one thing that I noticed was with the amount of flags that got picked up tonight, it almost felt like they killed momentum in a sense at multiple points. Where it's like every other play there was just a flag being thrown. Oh no, we're gonna pick this one up. Oh no, we're gonna pick that one up. And like, good on them for getting the call right a couple of times. There were a couple that were just egregiously missed. Like on the pick that Michael Penix threw, like Odunze's jersey was stretching like 3 yards behind him, man. Like that one alone was terrible. The Jabbar Muhammad one was not great. And like I want to make some comments about the commentators tonight too. Yeah, you see what I did there. But no, sorry. Go ahead. What do you have?
Well, I was just gonna say, let's flash back a week ago. I think Arizona State fans are gonna see that Odunze half jersey grab and say, okay, hang on a minute. That was like half a yard of a jersey grab. Jabbar Muhammad last week had literally a 1.5 yards worth of jersey on Arizona State's receiver. So again, I can see why they didn't call it. Both of them honestly should have been called, right? Last week and this week. But because if you don't, it's like, okay, well, you can't necessarily always complain when some calls go your way and some don't. Again, the offense shouldn't have been in that position anyways. There's plenty of other ways to kill the ball, run the clock a little bit more, things like that. I think almost like in the Oregon game where they took that end zone shot maybe a little too early. Like, because here's the thing, if Camden Lewis converts and they go to overtime and it's a different result, Washington's not even in this position. So it goes both ways.
Jackson Shore had a great question here. Do you guys think this McMillan injury is getting to the point where he might not be helpful the rest of the year? That is a great question, and I know we both have thoughts on just the way that's happened, but we're going to talk about after the break, because first, we're going to take a second because it's now time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. And much like Michael Penix, who did have another fantastic game today, 369 yards and 4 touchdowns, much like Michael Penix has changed the game for Washington, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. Their brews are great tasting and award-winning and beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. They brew over 50 styles of craft, non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, Goldens, Sours, and more. They're fit for all time, so you can drink them anytime and make any activity even more enjoyable, like watching a big game or your kid's game, tackling work, or working out, or seriously any other time. Do you want to get on the action? You can find Athletic Brewing Co.'s non-alcoholic brews at a store store near you, or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. And I mean, before we continue here, got one other message we got to get through, because do you want to buy tickets to one of the last 2 Husky games coming up this year? You can do that. And the best way to do that is Gametime, because it's all the ticket buying without the stress, because you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. With killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime app is awesome. There's so many great things that you can just do to make sure you're getting the best possible deal on there and the best possible view too. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, and last minute tickets, flash deals, and zone deals are just some of the things that make Gametime great. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. With zone deals, you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for an average of 18% savings, and the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right. Now to circle around back to that question from Jackson, the Jalen McMillan injury. Lars, what are your thoughts? I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those. This is the second time now that he's tried to go and couldn't, right? I mean, not that he couldn't, right? But he only lasted, a couple of drives, and he had the drop. Shout out Jackson for that comment too.
Love it.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those where, yes, you want Jalen back, but if he's not going to be effective, or if it's truly not, I mean, the thing is also, the more you put it back out there, the more it risks getting actually more injured, or, makes the injury worse.
Sure.
But then you also, because there's a couple of factors that come into play, right? Let's run with the theory that you shut down Jalen McMillan for the rest of the season, and just say, you know what, let's try and come back next year fully healthy, get you an off season, let's just not even try it. Then what do you do with Giles Jackson? Because now somebody's got to take those reps, and there's no need to have Giles and Jalen both on a pitch count, right? Where you're only playing them in maybe 1 or 2 more games. So it's like, okay, at some point push has got to come and shove. And especially against USC, I mean, this is the week where if supposedly they've been holding stuff back on offense or not showing everything, this is one of the weeks, and certainly the upcoming month in November, where you got to just open everything up. Like, you're not closing any door just to try and backdoor your way into the college football playoff, right? You want to convincingly get there, because also there is a path to where you could be left out if you're not as convincing. So
no, absolutely. I think the loss from Oklahoma definitely helps today, and then obviously the Michigan Ohio State game they'll have to play later in the season, so that will help too. But you're right, you want to be convincing, and you just want to keep winning, right? And I mean, we're going to get to this later in the week, but I want to get an Alex Grinch shot now because I can. Cal put up 49 on Alex Grinch today, so that's a good start. And maybe that'll help things out. Maybe that's just like a get right game. But obviously, Jalen McMillan is such a huge part of this offense that you really don't want to rule that out. And it kind of feels like he's right there. And who knows, like, really, I'm sure we'll find out more on Monday, what is going on with that, as much as we'll be able to hear, as coaching staffs in college football are always very guarded about injuries. But I don't think that they really need to shut him down. If it almost feels like he's right there, and that there's just like, he's like one step away, right? Or maybe it's just a little bit more confidence in cutting off of that leg, or maybe putting a brace on it, or just something like that. But the one thing that I will say that's been really helpful is that Jimmy Bernard was also able to play today, and he looked pretty good. And that was one where the coaching staff really did seem uncertain about his availability, like even as recently as Wednesday. So it's good to see that he was able to make the strides and needed to be able to play in the game. And that's something where he's not Jalen McMillan, where Jimmy Bernard is incredibly talented, and he's going to be a great player here, especially in 2024. But he's just not at the Jalen McMillan level just yet. So trying to make sure that in a season that could be as special as this is, right? If things continue to go right in November, things get right on offense, and things are just really just figured out. I know it's very vague in saying that, but that's really what it is. Jalen McMillan is a guy who can help you get there, who can help you get over the edge, because you've seen what this offense is like. They beat Oregon without Jalen McMillan this year. What do you think they could do with it? Like, especially if you can figure out the offensive line and you can just figure out a little bit more on the defense, this offense can just continue to be just elite. They played not great today. Let's just call it what it is. They didn't play that well today, and they put up 42 points. Yeah, it was not a great defense. They put up 42 points. It's still possible. There are a lot of things that need to be figured out, but this is the thing, right? And something, Lars, you and I've had conversation with this at length earlier in the season, on the show, off the show. We talk about these things all the time. Ryan Grubb said the offense is playing at a 7. They're playing at not even a 7 right now. So if you can just get back to that, there's a lot of upside here.
Well, not only that, but I mean, this offense should be able to get to an 8 or a 9, right? I mean, even the Oregon game wasn't a 9. I mean, it was a 10 result, right? You know, you get a massive win, but it by no means was a 10 offensive performance, even a 10 defensive performance. I mean, I think of what the defense is probably like a 7 right now. The offense is like a 6 or a 5.
I wouldn't give the defense a 7 for what happened today, but
right, but how much of that is also on the offense, right? Because once you get 2
for sure, yeah,
red zone and you get no points out of it. Granted, Stanford doesn't. I don't think I think they got 1 touchdown off of that. But either way, the point is, like, against better teams, they're going to make you pay even more. I mean, we saw Oregon destroy Utah at home today. I mean, I say at home, at Utah. So it's no matter where you play. I mean, even Lincoln Riley touched on it in his post against USC, where he said, if I would have told you 2 weeks ago that Washington would win a game at home, a conference game at home, and not have a single offensive touchdown, nobody would believe me. It's like, right. Yeah. It's like nobody would. And so I think the interesting thing about this is it's like these 3 last games, right? If you just kind of put them all together, Arizona State, and Oregon, that all the effort that went into those has to be multiplied by 2 or 3x against USC, because USC, they're kind of out of it, but they're really not, right? If they beat Washington, there's certainly, you know, there's a lot more things that happen in the month of November that put USC right back in the Pac-12 championship game. So this is certainly not, because again, it's one of those where, yeah, you lose if you're Washington, but really with the way USC's defense has been playing, you shouldn't. But this offense makes you question whether or not can they get there, even against a lackluster defense.
Right. And I think that's a really great point, because I think that it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, right? Where there's so much to be desired on offense. And again, playing against Alex Grinch just makes me excited to see what's possible, because my God, man, just I can't use the words to describe how I feel about him as a defensive coordinator, because he's just bad. He's just really, really bad. And I think that this is going to be a major opportunity for Washington to get right. And if they can do that, because let's look at who they have for the next 2 weeks after playing USC. They'll play at home against Utah, who's have a really good defense that kind of got exposed today by Oregon, but also their offense is just abysmal. So that's a whole separate conversation. But then Oregon State, who also has a really, really solid defense. So for the next couple of weeks after this USC game, there are some really tough defenses in your future. So you need to, there's a whole lot that you can figure out this week and figure out, hopefully on the field against USC, to just kind of carry you over. And if you can get that win, you can move to 9-0. You can just continue figuring things out down the stretch and just push for the ultimate goal of making it into college football playoff. Right.
Because, I mean, first of all, the goal is to win the conference, right? To make the Pac-12 championship, because they didn't do that last season. So that's your first goal, right? I mean, in order to do that, you have to go at least 3-1 in the month of November, at least, and just to play it safe, right? Because then you're going to talk about, well, who has 2 losses, who has 1, who has the head-to-head, you know, et cetera, right? I mean, especially like if you lose to Utah after they lost to Oregon, you know, now you're starting to get into the thick of things of, ooh, okay, well, now this head-to-head and that head-to-head. So if you're Washington, the USC, the other thing to think about with USC is if they fire Alex Grinch and those players, no. I'm just saying, if they put Dante Williams or whoever you want to in that position as defensive coordinator, I mean, some of the talk has been, I mean, the players don't want to play for Grinch. So if that's the case, and you put somebody else in there, now you have an extra motivated defense, it's got some talented players. I mean, not across the board, but certainly there's talent on that defense. Extra motivated at home against a top 5 Washington team. that's a scary proposition, especially with Washington kind of not backing their way into that game, but certainly not looking as confident as they should be.
No, absolutely. A couple things here before we jump into our final ad read of the day. Kraken Hawk, appreciate you. Appreciate everybody who listens to the show and subscribes. All you everydayers out there, you guys rock. And then when we come back, Cameron Michelle made a great point that we need the safeties to be healthy against USC. That's very true. We'll talk a little bit more about Vince Nunley and just kind of what might be going on there, because we won't speculate, but that's something where there are definitely some questions that need to be asked. But first, we're going to talk about our friends over at PrizePicks, because tomorrow is Sunday and my fantasy rosters are set, but I know I need to get my PrizePicks picks in there as well. And do you want to get on the action with PrizePicks? Because it's awesome. And PrizePicks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Testing your skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. And with weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, where each Tuesday PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. There's no better time to get on the action. Do you want to do that? You can go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. All right. Getting into the home stretch here. How are you feeling?
I'm not too bad. It's almost kind of like getting into the fourth quarter, where it's like, all right, you're winning. We're doing okay. We're our heads above water, but man, where do we want to go? Because there were some positives tonight, right?
I think we should talk about the safeties first, and then we can jump into that, just so we kind of finish off with all the negative and all the questions, and then we can end on the positive and send everybody off on the rest of their Saturday night on a good note.
Fair.
So do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, well, so that's the thing. Vince Nunley came in aboard. I asked him on Monday about his availability, because Chuck Morrell said he was going to defer because Vince Nunley hasn't played in a couple of weeks, hasn't suited in a couple of weeks, haven't seen him in a couple of weeks. And basically he described it as he likely won't be available for the game, not injury related. So again, it's kind of like an unofficial suspension. Like, it's not that he's suspended, because as we've seen in the past, if you're suspended indefinitely, even if it's for 2-3 weeks or whatever, the board will just say, hey, he's suspended, right? So I think it's kind of, there's a gray area of we're not necessarily totally sure what the reason is. And again, as you said, we're not going to speculate, but there's certainly a reason why he's being held out, right? And we saw, again, McEllisteen was able to get in there and make a couple of plays tonight. But again, Vince Nunley, when he was in, especially in the first 5 games of the season, he looked really good. He looked like a guy who could replace Asa Turner a lot easier and make that loss not as big of an impact for the defense. But we haven't seen him, and right. So that's up to Vince to get that sorted out. That's up to the coaching staff when that is that he's able to get sorted out. But I think, again, when they needed it, McEllisteen did a serviceable job, right? He had a decent pass breakup, almost had an interception on the first drive. So again, McKell's a guy where you can put him back there, but again, it's how much do you put him back there? How much does he play, right? Because Dom looked pretty good, but also got beat a couple of times. So the safety play again tonight was C+, C, B minus at range, B minus at times, but again, not great, because again, we're still talking about you gave up just a penny under 500 yards of offense, so it can't be that great. Ashton Daniels almost outdueled Michael Penix. He finished with 2 less yards, so it's not like it was that great of a performance.
I think that with the way that the depth was today, which is something I wrote about on Inside the Huskies earlier this week, I think Dom was kind of forced to play out of position today, where he kind of seemed like he was asked to be more of a cover 2, just kind of even just sometimes like a cover 1, cover 3, kind of just like playing center field kind of safety, when really that role should have been flipped with McEllisteen, who just kind of has the range to do that a little bit better, while you can just kind of leave Dom a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, just in the box, and just let him do more of the things that he does, like tackling wise, like our buddy Ben Glassmeyer likes to talk about a lot. So, and I feel like just adding, whether it be Cameron Fabiculon, if he's able to come back at any point soon, or if Asa Turner is able to return next week, that really will just kind of sort some of the things out and just kind of get them a little bit more back to normal. As for Vince Nunley, we'll kind of see. That's something we'll try to press the coaches on a little bit more this week, but it's something where if it's off the field, they don't have to talk about it. So we can ask as much as we want, but they're never, they don't have to, they don't have to go in depth if they don't want to. But you said you want to talk about some positives. What's your first one that you have?
Well, first of all, we got to talk about Ja'Lynn Polk only because I said before the game,
Respect.
I said 120, 130 and 2 touchdowns, and he got it and took 5 catches to get. And really, he got more than half of it on that 192 yarder. So I think again, part of the stats are going to be a little bit skewed, right? We're like, oh wow, he had 130, 143, 148 on 5 catches. So it's like, okay, but one of those was the 92 yarder, so you take that out. And again, it wasn't great. Rome doesn't even finish with 100 yards. He finished with 89. So again, Stanford's defense held basically UW's top 2 receivers. If you again, it's hard to take out the 1 touchdown, right? Because it is a significant play. And there was also defensive pass interference on the play. So, it's one of those where, okay, if you take that play out, the pass game, Penix is in the high 270s, high 260s, right? It doesn't look as convincing as it does with that touchdown. So you got to give credit when credit is due. When they needed to truly make a play, it's almost like the story all season, right? In these close games, when they needed to pull it out, they found a way to. But every other drive, it's like, okay, now we're pulling teeth to get it. And it's like, okay, at some point, this offense that was just lighting up the country has to, get even somewhat close to that. Dylan Johnson, I thought, had another great game tonight. They didn't run it as much as I thought he would, but 84 yards, a touchdown. And I believe your 120 mark.
My 120 mark did not hit, but my one that did hit, so thank you for leading me into that, is Edifoni Ofosio, who I went with 8+ total tackles. He ended up with 12, so I'm going to just take that one, chalk it up as a win. We still don't have a point system going, but, maybe we should. I'd love to see kind of where we are on that. But one of the positives that I wanted to talk about was a guy who made a couple plays tonight, and he kind of does this in spurts, is Devin Culp. Devin Culp had a really good game. And obviously the touchdown was on a bit of a busted coverage, so take it for what you will, but he continues to show week in and week out why he was such a highly touted recruit at a high school, where he's a super athletic dude. And there have been times where he's struggled with drops, but when he is able to secure the ball, he is just lethal after the catch. And I do mean lethal. Like we saw that first one where he just took that little swing pass and took 25 yards up the sideline and nearly scored on that play, and then scores later on in the game. And it almost feels like that if the receivers aren't making plays down the field, or they're double covered or whatever, Devin Culp is such a great option underneath that I kind of want to see him get involved more at times. And we've seen, and that Washington does have a bunch of talented tight ends, right? Jack Westover, Josh Cuevas, who we really like. Quentin Moore hasn't really gotten in the mix, but we know what he can do. And it's just there's a whole lot there to like. And it almost feels like that they should, and Ryan Grubb might want to find a way to utilize these guys and just take advantage of the matchups that they might have a little bit more often.
Well, see, the problem with that is Ryan Grubb can scheme it open, because he did a couple of times tonight, and Mike won't even look at him for whatever reason. Like I forgot which play it was, but there was one where he threw it to Ja'Lynn Polk in double coverage and had Devin Culp wide open in the flat, who easily could have just run the 5 or 8 yards to get the first down. And it didn't look like Penix. And the ironic part is, as a lefty, Penix's first line of sight would be if he just looks, Culp was right there. So it's a matter of Penix kind of having to get, and that's the other thing too. Penix did have 1 pick tonight, but he could have had a second if that offsides doesn't negate throwing into double coverage to Ja'Lynn Polk. So there's a lot of.
I will say, in his defense there, I'm sorry to cut you off, but in his defense there, he saw the offside and then just said, okay, I'm just going to chuck it down the field. That's my go route. I think that's kind of what happened there. So I don't really fault him for that.
No, I agree, but still, it's one of those where I understand the mentality, right? You have a free play, but it doesn't get back to what I'm saying earlier where, okay, what if they pick up that offsides flag?
Right.
And now you're like, oh, well, I thought I had a free play. It's like, right. But you can also throw that thing out of bounds and just live to fight another down, knowing you're going to get the free 5 yards. You don't have to always break the bank. And again, don't put the game in the hands of the officials. Like, that's the one lesson Washington can take from the last 3 weeks. Do not put it in the hands of the officials. Yes, you got lucky against Arizona State a couple of times. So did Arizona State. Stanford got bailed out a couple of times. So did Washington. So yes, you've come out on the net positive result, but by no means was it pretty, and by no means should you live by that.
Right. You got any other positives you want to hit on? Because I want to, before we get out of here, Kraken Hawk has a great question here. 14 playoff predictions. I think that'd be a really fun way to end it. So if you got any other positives, feel free to hit on one more before we dive into this.
No, I mean, I think it's not a positive, but I'm not sure Washington's going to crack the top 4. I truly don't. At least in the first week, right? Because especially right now, you're going to have Michigan, Ohio State in the top 4. I think that's just a safe bet. Because when you look at those two teams, the way they have won and the way Washington has won, it's not the same over the last 4 weeks. Now you'll say, hey, well, Ohio State barely beat, who was it? Somebody early in the season. Again, it was an ugly game, right? Where Kyle McCord hadn't gotten in the rhythm. Marvin Harrison had like 2 catches for like 35 yards, or it was a nothing game, but they still won by 2 touchdowns. It's like, okay.
Right.
That game, outlier. The Michigan State blowout, outlier. It's like you start weeding through and you start to get into the middle of the season when games start to matter more and when you still know more about these teams and the direction. They're both ascending, but Washington is closer to plateauing than they are to ascending compared to the other 2 Big Ten schools that they're going to meet next season.
That's fair. So to go off of that, I'm going to give my first 4. I think that it's going to be. This is tough because I agree with you. I think that Washington will be 5 to start off. And the reasoning is because it'll be Georgia, be Michigan, Ohio State, and then it'll be Florida State. That's the way the top 4 is going to work out at first, because everything is just going to be built up for that Michigan, Ohio State matchup for as long as possible, unless Ohio State or Michigan struggles against a team like Washington did this past week, like a Stanford or whoever it is that they end up playing. So that's where I'm going to go first. I think that's what we'll see come Tuesday.
The question is Oregon going to leapfrog Washington, even though they have 1 loss? Like, how close are Oregon and Washington going to be ranked, right? Because I think that for me is also going to be an interesting one, because Oregon blows out Utah, Washington squeaks by both Arizona State and Stanford. It's like, okay, if you beat Oregon by 3 and you barely beat your other 2 opponents by what? I mean, yes, you had 11 tonight, 9 tonight. 9, yeah.
Well, 9 tonight, 7 last week, or 8 last week.
8 last week and 7 against Arizona. So it's none of these are convincing by any stretch, where Oregon, at least on paper, and certainly by the way they played, has outplayed Washington, right? I think that's a fair statement. Yes, Washington has the head-to-head, but I mean, you can make a case for Oregon to be ahead of Washington in some people's eyes just because of the way the results have gone. I'm not saying a 1-loss Oregon should be ahead of Washington. I'm just saying
that there's a case there.
Right, exactly. I'm just to be very clear, I'm not saying not pro Oregon here, but I'm just saying, like, being a realist, right? Being a realist, yes, you beat Oregon, so you have the head-to-head. It wasn't convincing. Oregon just as much could have won that game. So you have to start to win your games in convincing fashion. You can't squeak by Oregon State. You can, right, if you want to remain undefeated, but you're going to be on the outside looking in as long as possible until you actually prove that you belong as one of the top 4 teams in the country.
I couldn't agree with you more there. That feels like a great place to wrap this up. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everybody down in the comments for chiming in just throughout the show. You guys have been awesome. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much, you guys, for just being the everydayers that you are. And if it's your first time here, hey, welcome. This is the show. This is what we do. But also, if you like it, feel free to come back. Feel free to subscribe. There are a lot of easy ways to do that. Wherever you get your podcasts, we're on there, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. Please feel free to subscribe, like the video, leave us a 5-star review, whatever it is. Leave us a comment. We'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. We might have some time to do a mailbag a little bit later this week, so that would be super fun. So get as many comments as you can in. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Monday.